Good morning. It's Wednesday, June 4th. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 607 days old. I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back yet again to the FDD Morning Brief. A crazy day out of the region yesterday as Israel took incoming fire from two different countries, Yemen and Syria. We've grown accustomed to those Houthi missiles out of Yemen by now, but two rockets out of Syria was not something that I expected. This is supposed to be a new and moderate regime in Damascus, warm and cuddly, or at least in control of the armed forces there. You know, I'm not buying any of that. Anyway, the Israelis responded to the attacks, which came from roughly 12 cliques inside Syria. Israel also made it clear that it held the new Syrian regime responsible for the provocation or anything else that will come out of there in the future. We're going to watch this space carefully now. Here's hoping that multi-front attacks don't become the new normal. Our guest today is Eitan Fischberger, a Qatar specialist who, like me, has a bee in his bonnet when it comes to the oil-rich emirate that cozies up with a menagerie of terrorist groups. Eitan and I will talk about the way Doha backs Hamas as it simultaneously courts Washington, the growing acceptance of Hamas propaganda in mainstream Western media, and much more. So stay tuned for that. I'll be picking Eitan's brain right after I share a few thoughts of my own. Here's a question. Why has the war in the Middle East, which has now raged for more than 600 days, not sparked a wave of Sunni jihadi violence? It's a fascinating question, which was posed to me by a foreign government contact of mine who paid a visit yesterday. Here's the history. Some 20 years ago, while the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, and the War on Terror was raging, we heard the same message ad nauseum. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict was a key driver of the jihadi problem that the United States was battling. The logic held that the United States needed to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict if we were ever to win the war on terror. It was part of the whole battle for hearts and minds, and I never bought what the State Department was selling. In fact, I rarely do. Well, we now know how it ended. The United States surrendered in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we have essentially ignored the Sunni jihadi problem that continues to fester to this day. Fast forward to 2023, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict began to rage in ways that few can recall. And guess what? Surprise! The Sunni jihad problem has somehow failed to manifest. What explains this? I can't exactly say, but it's undeniably the Iran-led Shiite axis that's doing the fighting. The Sunnis have remained quiet. So what's the lesson here? Simple. Beware of conventional wisdom as it relates to the Israeli-Palestinian arena. It rarely turns out to be true. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, the Trump administration okayed the integration of foreign fighters into the Syrian army. This is almost certainly not going to end well. Syria's new government wants to incorporate thousands of foreign fighters, many of them former jihadi rebels, into the Syrian army. 3 Syrian defense officials told Reuters that Damascus's plan involves folding 3,500 fighters, including Uyghurs from China, into the newly established 84th Syrian Army Division. I mean, what could possibly go wrong here, right? Anyway, Washington is on board with this plan, so long as Damascus proceeds with transparency. Better to include fighters who are loyal to Syrian leadership than to leave them prey to ISIS or Al-Qaeda. That's the thinking here, and it marks a decisive shift from where Washington was just weeks ago. In fact, the administration was dead set against foreign fighters joining the Syrian army until Trump visited the Gulf in mid-May. And get a load of this. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, who I like to call Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, is expected to address the UN General Assembly in September. No Syrian president has addressed the UN since 1967, and I can't remember if there was ever an Al-Qaeda leader, former or present, that has ever done so. What a time to be alive. Headline 2, rumors are swirling about who will replace Muhammed Sinwar as Hamas's commander-in-chief. Okay, maybe not swirling. We think we know who it is. His name is Izzanin al-Haddad. He is the commander of Hamas's northern Gaza brigade, On October 6, 2023, al-Haddad reportedly distributed written attack instructions to Hamas commanders and then helped coordinate them in the next day. Al-Haddad is also reportedly responsible for overseeing hostage handovers, if we ever see a deal with Hamas, that is. Word on the street is that Mr. Haddad has survived 6 attempts on his life by the Israelis. In fact, of Hamas's 5 original brigade commanders, al-Haddad is the only one left, and that's probably why he's poised to replace Sinwar as Hamas's Gaza chief. I guess it's easy to get the top job in Hamas when you're the only one of your peers still breathing. Headline 3, chaos is festering on the Gaza aid front. Yesterday, the Red Cross and the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry claimed that at least 27 Palestinians were killed near an aid distribution site run by the U.S.-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF. Predictably, mainstream media stories were blaming Israel without concrete evidence. The IDF did say that Israeli troops fired near suspects who ignored IDF warning shots, but the IDF did not confirm any casualties. Just for giggles, go ahead and check the New York Times and the Washington Post this morning, among others. Those stories about Israelis opening fire on Gazans seeking aid, quietly removed. Gross. Okay, now for some logistical updates. GHF appointed a new executive chairman to replace the organization's original CEO, Jack Wood. Wood resigned last week, right before GHF began operating. The new chairman is Dr. Johnny Moore, a friend of FDD and an American evangelical leader who serves on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, USERF. Moore said he's already held encouraging meetings with the Red Cross, which, by the way, refuses to work with the GHF until now. I hear the organization is taking a day off tomorrow or maybe even today to prepare for greater distribution of aid. All of this is designed to flood Gaza with assistance in order to deprive Hamas of its ability to control distribution. All right. Time for that convo now with Middle East analyst Eitan Fischberger, whose written work appears in outlets like Tablet and Newsweek and The Hill and plenty more. We're going to talk to him about the most duplicitous country in the Middle East, the arsonist and the firefighter, the dumpster fire of corruption on the Persian Gulf. Yes, I am talking about Qatar. So hold your nose, folks. Let's dive in. Welcome to the program, Eitan Fischberger.
Thanks for having me.
All right. First of all, we're going to give a shout out to your grandparents because, I don't know if you call them Bubby and Zadie or Mom and Papa, but, got to welcome them. If they're listeners, love it. But welcome to the program.
It's good to be here.
All right. So let's start with what you make of the recent fake aid massacre incidents in Gaza. These stories are overblown, of course, but why is Hamas pushing these false narratives? And how exactly are they pulling it off?
Right. So, Hamas has been pushing fake narratives like this since the war started and since well before the war. But I think what we're seeing now is an intensification of these hoaxes. And I think it's because, honestly, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is actually doing a good job of feeding Gazans. It's provided, 7, 8 million. I've lost count of how many millions of meals to the people of Gaza so far. And I think that that's sort of taking away Hamas's ability to hold the population with an iron grip, because if they can't control and exploit the aid, they lose a lot of their power. So I think that these hoaxes are all aimed at trying to get this foundation out of Gaza. In terms of how they're able to pull it off, they obviously have the journalists that are, let's say, tied to Hamas on the ground that are promoting these narratives. They have people in the hospitals that are promoting these narratives. I helped expose a few months ago that a lot of the hospital directors in Gaza are actually card-carrying members of Hamas. The Civil Defense Agency there is run by the Interior Ministry. The Red Crescent is tied to Hamas. So, when you have all these actors working in unison, pulling off hoaxes like these actually isn't so difficult.
Yeah, and it certainly doesn't. It doesn't help anything when you got mainstream media outlets running this stuff. And then, as we see now, the stuff's getting taken down. They're not even explaining. There's no corrections. So it's not like, by the way, it doesn't even matter when you issue a correction because
nobody sees it. Yeah.
Right. No, the damage is done, right? It's like a little footnote somewhere on the website. So, yeah, they're certainly getting help from folks here as well, which, we somehow still can't seem to solve for that. All right. But let me ask you, why do you think so many major media outlets are so quick to uncritically promote Hamas's version of these events? I think that's a huge question that we still can't seem to answer. What's your take?
Sure. So, obviously, it would be easy to say that there's malice involved and a good dose of just anti-Israel bias and even just a wee bit of anti-Semitism. That could be part of the explanation. I actually have a somewhat of a simpler explanation, I guess. I think it's just a matter of that the media in the West doesn't see media the way that Hamas does. The people in the journalistic establishment, they see media as a vehicle to provide facts and to provide stories and to provide news to people who are consumers of news. But Hamas sees it differently. Hamas explicitly refers to the propaganda and the media that it promotes as part of its war machine. When a journalist tied to Hamas, when a journalist who's doubling as a member of Hamas, or I should say, a member of Hamas who's doubling as a journalist, when they're killed by the IDF, how are they eulogized by Hamas and Hamas media? They call them, quote, resistance journalists or mujahideen journalists, right? These are not people that see media the same way that the West does. So when the people at Reuters or the AP or CNN or the New York Times, just to name a few, WAPO, when they see a story coming out of Gaza, they think it's just coming from journalists. I mean, I'm giving them a very charitable interpretation, but let's just say that. They think that it's coming from media. They can't fathom that, these journalists in Gaza that are promoting these narratives are actually part of the Hamas war machine.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. And by the way, this is it's not like merely a terrorist group phenomenon, right? I mean, you see authoritarian regimes also sort of employ journalists in this way. And I guess, increasingly we have a hard time differentiating between the sort of journalists that are serving a cause or serving a nation and those that are committed to the practice of journalism. And I guess welcome to this new kind of dystopian age of journalism. I guess that's where we are. All right. You've investigated Qatar's ties to Hamas extensively. And this is how I sort of, I guess, how I've come to know your work. And you've identified or you've looked into how that relationship helps Hamas spread its propaganda and shape its global opinion about the group. So what's going on here? I mean, how would you break this down for us?
Sure. I think, the clearest example of how you see this in practice is that, Al Jazeera, which is the state-run, media outlet run by the Qatari government and shared by members of the royal family, they promote narratives for Hamas regularly. So the story of the fake aid massacres, they originated in large part from Al Jazeera and from Al Jazeera journalists on the ground. People like Anas al-Sharif, who's still active in Gaza and who Israel says is a card-carrying member of Hamas. Either he's a sniper or just a member of the Nukhba commando unit of Hamas. He's simultaneously a journalist for Al Jazeera and is providing a lot of the footage from these incidents, that then the media in the West runs with and says, oh, look what happened. Look what Israel did. Israel's so terrible. I found dozens of journalists who work for Al Jazeera and are simultaneously members of Hamas, of Islamic Jihad, of the PFLP, all U.S. designated terrorist organizations. And they are just freely operating in Gaza. You have pictures of them in uniform, in Hamas uniform, saying, we are Hamas, we love Hamas, we love October 7th. And this is in large part due to Qatar allowing them to have the infrastructure to do so, right? They're not talking into a void. They're not talking into what might be, God help us, the largest media outlet on the planet.
Wow. All right. So on that note, what do you make of Qatar's growing influence in the United States? I mean, especially given the red carpet treatment it received during Trump's recent visit, or I guess actually the other way around. Trump received red carpet treatment there, but what it showed was that things were going pretty well. We heard about a $1.2 trillion investment package. I don't even know how you count that high, but okay. What's going on here with the Qataris in the United States? And I mean, how do you unpack that?
Sure. So, I mean, it's obviously quite a shift from the first Trump administration when Trump was lambasting Qatar for its ties to terror and its support for Hamas. I think that, Trump, for President Trump, for whatever reason, sees them differently now. I'm not really sure why that is. But what I do know is that Qatari influence, Qatari money in the U.S. has been an overall very, very negative for the United States and for the American people and for the Jewish people. I think that anytime we see Qatari money infiltrating an arena of society, it always redounds to it always ends up negatively impacting the Jews, whether it's and by the way, again, Western society in general. When you have Qatari money influencing academia, when you have Qatari money influencing think tanks, you have Qatari money influencing the media. It never comes without strings, right? There's always some sort of like implicit influence that comes along with it, and I think it's a mistake, and hopefully there could be some sort of course correct.
Yeah, and we hear all the time, hey, it's money and we need that money, and America's debt, and but it all comes at a cost. It really does. You got an Islamic autocratic dictatorship that is funneling money into the United States, and nothing's for free. When it looks like it's for free, you're the product. And ultimately, I think we have to start to understand that the Qataris are trying to buy more and more influence here, and that is not going to end well. But let me ask you, broadly speaking, what is Qatar's strategy here? I mean, all the money flowing into the U.S. and the influence that it buys, at the same time, all the support for terror groups. And by the way, I mean, we talk a lot about Hamas, but there's Taliban, and there's Al-Qaeda, and there's ISIS, and there's Muslim Brotherhood, and it's this just sort of witch's brew of nasty groups. My grandmother used to say, with one tuchus, you can't dance at two weddings. And here the Qataris are dancing at two weddings. So what gives?
I think that, the Qataris have had a strategy for years. Hi. You hear me?
Yeah, I can. Go ahead. Keep going.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So they have a strategy called hedging, where they play two sides of every single issue. And so I think that what the Qataris are doing is that they think to themselves, all we need to do is buy legitimacy in the West's eyes, and then we can promote.
All right. I'm not sure what's going on here, folks. It sounds like we're having some technical difficulties. Eitan, are you with us?
I'm with you.
All right. Look, it sounds like we're having
You
a
hear me?
little bit. Yeah, it sounds like we're having a little bit of a technical problem here. You want to try to answer that one more time?
Sure. About the Qataris playing the arsonist and the firefighter.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically what I was saying is that I think that, and hopefully you can hear this, the Qataris, sometimes the simplest explanation is the most accurate one, right? I think it's called Occam's razor in English. The idea is just that they're playing out of both sides of their mouth. They're functioning as the arsonist and the firefighter. They realize that if they just, act like friends.
All right. I'm not sure exactly what's happening here. I think we need to move on from here. Eitan, I'm not sure what's going on. I can see you kind of coming back in and out. We'll have you back another time. But I want to thank you for joining us today on the FDD Morning Brief.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry about that, folks. Not sure what happened. It was we were losing sound, and all right, we'll move on. So here's what FDD has on tap for you today. Check out my colleague Ivana Stradner's latest in the Kyiv Post on rising tensions between Russia and Serbia. Moscow has accused Belgrade of betrayal by arming Ukraine in a bid to gain favor with the West. Russia is now trying to emphasize the shared Slavic roots that bind the two nations' interests. But as Ivana warns, with a friend like this, Serbia needs no enemies. In the Washington Examiner, FTD's Natalie Icano and Sinan Jidi expose how Qatar uses its wealth to buy influence in the West, along the lines of what Eitan was just talking about, most recently with a Boeing 747, even as it funds terror groups like Hamas and spreads anti-Western rhetoric through its Al Jazeera network. My colleagues argue that Washington must wake up to the reality Qatari money comes with strings attached. Finally, in 1945, my colleague Hussein Abdul Hussein sounds the alarm on a crisis the world is ignoring, the war in Sudan. A media focus stays locked on the Israeli-Hamas conflict. As that happens, Sudan teeters on the edge of an Islamist takeover, a catastrophe that could rival the Taliban's grab of power in Afghanistan. Hussein makes the case that U.S. engagement is urgently needed to help broker peace before it's too late. All right, folks, sorry again for the technical difficulties, but that's going to do it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the FDD Morning Brief. If you want to read more super smart stuff from my super smart colleagues, check out our website and peruse our social media. And please do support our work with a tax-deductible donation at fdd.org/invest. Tune in Friday for another riveting episode of the FDD Morning Brief. Until then, I'm Jonathan Schanzer, signing off for FDD.